Hello everyone, welcome back to the Network Fixer. In today's video, we are going to cover most commonly asked network engineer interview questions and answers. Whether you are a fresher, an L1 or L2 network engineer, or preparing for a job switch, this video will help you crack networking interviews with confidence. Watch till the end because I will also share real interview tips based on industry experience. Let's start off with basic networking questions. So you might get questions like, what is a computer network? A computer network is a group of devices such as computers, servers, routers and switches that are connected together to share data, resources and services. Examples include LAN or local area network, WAN or wide area network. Another example would be Internet itself. The next question can be, what is LAN, WAN, MAN and PAN? LAN stands for Local Area Network. It is a network within a building or office. WAN stands for Wide Area Network. It's a network covering large geographical areas, example Internet. MAN or Metropolitan Area Network, it's a network across a city. PAN or Personal Area Network, it comprises of Bluetooth, mobile hotspot, etc. The next question can be, what is the OSI model? The OSI model is a 7-layer framework that explains how data travels from one device to another. So the 7 layers are physical layer, data link layer, network layer, transport layer, session layer, presentation layer, application layer. Always remember this as, please do not throw sausage pizza away. The next question can be the difference between OSI and TCP/IP model. So OSI model is of 7 layers whereas TCP/IP model is of 4 layers. OSI model is a conceptual model whereas TCP/IP is a practical model. OSI model is used for learning. TCP/IP model is used in real networks. If we consider topics from IP addressing and subnetting, questions might come up like, what is an IP address? An IP address is a unique identifier assigned to each device on a network. The different types of IP addresses are IPv4 address, IPv6 address. IPv4 is a 32-bit address, IPv6 is a 128-bit address. So if you consider an example of IPv4, you can consider 192.168.1.2. There might be a question like, what is the difference between IPv4 and IPv6? IPv4 is a 32-bit whereas IPv6 is 128-bit. IPv4 has limited addresses whereas IPv6 has unlimited addresses. IPv4 uses NAT. In IPv6, we don't need NAT. So the next question can be, what is subnetting? Subnetting is the process of dividing a large network into smaller networks to improve performance, security and manageability. If we consider an example of 192.168.2.0/24, it can be split into multiple subnets. If you are preparing for interview, you should be strong with subnetting. If you are not strong in subnetting, at least explain the concept clearly. Let's move on to the topics from switching and routing. So you might get questions like, what is a switch? A switch is a layer 2 device that forwards data based on MAC addresses. There might be question like, what is a router? A router is a layer 3 device that forwards packets based on IP addresses and connects different networks. There might be questions like, what is the difference between a hub, switch and router? A hub broadcasts data to all the ports A switch sends data only to destination MAC address. A router routes traffic between the networks. The next question is, what is VLAN? VLAN or virtual LAN logically separates devices within the same physical network to improve security and performance. Example, VLAN 10 for HR, VLAN 20 for IT, etc. Let's move on to the next topic of protocols and services. There might be questions like, what is TCP and UDP? TCP is a reliable connection-oriented protocol. Examples like HTTP or FTP. TCP stands for Transmission Control Protocol. The next one is UDP, which stands for User Datagram Protocol. It is a fast connectionless protocol. Examples include DNS or Voice over IP. What is DNS? DNS converts domain names into IP addresses. Example, google.com might be with an IP address of 142.250.x.x. The next question, what is DHCP? DHCP automatically assigns IP address, subnet mask, gateway, and DNS. Next question, what is NAT? NAT translates private IP addresses into public IPs, allowing internet access. Let's move on to the next topics from network security. You might get questions like, what is a firewall? A firewall is a security device that allows or blocks traffic based on predefined rules. The types of firewall include stateful firewall, next generation firewall, or NGFW. What is VPN? VPN creates a secure encrypted tunnel over the internet. The types of VPN are Site-to-Site VPN, Remote Access VPN. Let's move on to the troubleshooting questions. You might get questions like, how do you troubleshoot network issues? So your simple answer can be, I follow a structured approach. I will check the physical connectivity first and later verify IP configuration. I use commands like ping, traceroute. First I will try initially pinging to the gateway, and later I will try pinging the external IP, and later I do a traceroute and I check the DNS, and post that I will analyze the logs. If you ask me, structured answers impress interviewers. The next question can be, what tools do you use? We use tools like ping, traceroute, Wireshark, Netstat, Nmap, to name a few. If we consider topics from advanced switching, you might get questions like, what is STP and why is it required? Spanning tree protocol or STP prevents network loops in layer 2 networks. If loops occur, there are broadcast storms, there is MAC table instability, there is a network outage. STP blocks redundant paths and keeps only one active path. So what are the states of STP or spanning tree protocol? Blocking, listening, learning, forwarding, and disabled. So you can also mention RSTP for faster convergence. So they might ask questions like, what is the difference between STP and RSTP? STP is with a slow convergence, RSTP is with a faster convergence. So STP will take anywhere between 30 to 50 seconds, whereas RSTP will take approximately 5 to 6 seconds. STP is used in legacy networks, RSTP is used in modern networks. So the next question might be in terms of port security. They might ask you like, what is port security? Port security limits the number of MAC addresses allowed on a switch port. Port security is used to prevent unauthorized devices. It improves LAN security. So let's move on to the routing protocols. You might get questions like what is routing? Routing is the process of selecting the best path for data packets to reach the destination network. You might get questions like what is the difference between static and dynamic routing? Static routing is with a manual configuration, whereas dynamic routing is automatic. There is no overhead in static routing. In dynamic routing, you use protocol. In static routing, these are suitable for smaller networks. Dynamic routing is best for large networks. The next question is what is OSPF? OSPF stands for Open Shortest Path First. This is a link state routing protocol. It uses cost asymmetric. The convergence is faster and it supports areas. The next question that you might get is what is OSPF area? OSPF area is used to reduce routing table size. It improves performance. Example, area 0 is the backbone area. Area 1, area 2 are like non-backbone. So the next question might be like what is the difference between RIP, OSPF and BGP? RIP stands for Routing Information Protocol. It is a distance vector protocol. It is used in small networks. OSPF stands for Open Shortest Path First. It's a link state routing protocol. It's used in enterprise networks. BGP or Border Gateway Protocol is a path vector routing protocol. It's mainly used in internet or enterprise networks. Let's move on to next section, network services and protocols. So you might get question like what is ARP? ARP stands for Address Resolution Protocol. It resolves IP address to MAC address within a local network. The next question can be what is ICMP? ICMP stands for Internet Control Message Protocol. It is used for network diagnostics, error reporting. Examples, when you do a ping, it might say like destination unreachable. The next question can be like what happens when you type a URL in browser? This is one of the common interview questions and you need to explain it clearly. You can take an example like www.google.com. As soon as you type www.google.com on the browser, it resolves the DNS to the IP address. Later it goes with the TCP handshake and later it proceeds with the HTTP or HTTPS request. The server will respond and later the page loads. Let's move on to the next section of firewall and security. You might get questions like what is the difference between stateful and stateless firewall? In stateless firewall, the device checks the packets individually, whereas in the stateful firewalls, it tracks the session and maintains in the state tables. Stateless is faster, stateful is more secure. Stateless is less intelligent, stateful is intelligent. You might get questions like what is a next-gen firewall or NGFW? Next-gen firewall includes application control, IPS, antivirus, SSL inspection, user-based policies. So the next question can be what is IPS and IDS? IDS stands for Intrusion Detection System. It just detects the attacks, which means it just alerts us. IPS stands for Intrusion Prevention System. It does the detection and also blocks the attacks. So the next question is on VPN and cloud. So you might get questions like what is an IPsec? IPsec is a tunnel used for securing IP traffic using authentication, encryption, protocols, ESP, AH, IKE. What is the difference between site-to-site and remote VPN? Site-to-site is between one office to another office, whereas remote access is for a user who tries to connect to the office. Site to site is always connected. Remote access is based on demand. Site to site can be done on router or firewall. Remote access is configured on either laptop or mobile. So let's move on to the next section of networking in cloud, be it like AWS or Azure. The key concept that you want to know is VPC, VNet, subnets, route tables, internet gateway, NAT gateway, security groups. So let's move on to the real troubleshooting scenarios. There may be question like user can access IP but not website. Why? The possible reasons can be due to the DNS issue, firewall blocking port 53, or proxy misconfiguration. The next troubleshooting question is internet is working but VPN is not connecting. So the structured approach is going to be to start checking with the firewall ports, encryption mismatch, phase 1 or phase 2 settings, user authentication. If we consider questions from the basics of the firewall, you might get questions like what is a firewall? A firewall is a security device that monitors, allows or blocks network traffic based on the predefined security rules. It acts as a barrier between trusted and untrusted networks. You might get questions like what are the types of firewalls? The answer is gonna be packet filtering firewall, stateful firewall, next-gen firewall. What is a zone in firewall? A zone is a logical grouping of interfaces with similar security requirements. Example LAN, WAN, DMZ. The next question can be what is a firewall policy? A firewall policy defines source, destination, service, action, be it either allow or deny, NAT, traffic is evaluated top to bottom. You always have to mention policy order matters. What is NAT in firewall? NAT translates private IP addresses to public IPs. There are different types of NAT: source NAT, destination NAT, static NAT, and PAT. Difference between SNAT and DNAT. SNAT or source NAT changes source IP. DNAT or destination NAT changes destination IP. SNAT is applied towards the outbound traffic, whereas DNAT towards the inbound traffic. SNAT is used for internet access, whereas DNAT is used for port forwarding. Let's move on to next section, UTM or next generation firewall features. You might get question like what is UTM? UTM stands for Unified Threat Management. It combines multiple security features in a single firewall. It consists of antivirus, IPS, web filtering, application control. What is IPS? IPS or Intrusion Prevention System detects and blocks malicious traffic in real time using signatures and anomaly detection. What is application control? Application control allows or blocks traffic based on application type, not just port numbers. Example, allow Microsoft Teams, block torrent, etc. What is SSL inspection? SSL inspection decrypts encrypted HTTPS traffic to inspect threats. Types would include certificate inspection, deep inspection. The next question can be what is IPsec VPN? IPsec VPN secures communication using encryption, authentication, integrity. There are multiple phases, phase 1 and phase 2. In phase 1, it is responsible for tunnel establishment. Phase 2 is responsible for data transfer. The next question can be like, have you come across any common IPsec VPN issues? The answer will be like pre-shared key mismatch, encryption mismatch, wrong subnet, firewall ports blocked, NAT traversal disabled. What is SSL VPN? SSL VPN provides remote access using browser or client-based VPN over HTTPS. What is the difference between IPsec and SSL VPN? IPsec happens at network level, whereas SSL VPN happens at application level. IPsec is helpful for site-to-site connection. SSL VPN is used for remote users connectivity. IPsec is always on, SSL VPN is only on demand. Let's move on to next section on high availability and logging. So you might get questions like, what is firewall HA? HA stands for high availability. HA ensures no downtime if a firewall fails. There are different modes, active, and active passive. What parameters are synced in HA? Firewall policies, NAT or network address translation, routing, and sessions. How do you check firewall logs? You can execute commands like, once you go to the respective sections, either in GUI or CLI of the logging, you would see the alert traffic, block traffic, threats, VPN events. So these are available in the log section. So what you need to check is source address, destination address, service, action, and the reason. So you might get real interview scenarios like, server is not accessible from internet. How do you troubleshoot this? We need to check the assigned public IP address. We need to check the DNAT rules. We need to check the firewall policies. We also need to check the security profiles and if there are any firewalls at the server level. The next scenario based question would be, internet works but some websites are blocked. So the possible reasons in this scenario is either with the web filtering, application control, DNS filtering, SSL inspection issue. The next question can be like, how do you troubleshoot any network issue? The answer will be, I follow a layered and logical approach. I understand the issue. I check physical connectivity. I would verify IP configuration. I will test the connectivity using commands like ping or traceroute. I will check the DNS. I will check the firewall and logs. I will apply the fix and monitor. Please note, a structured approach matters more than tools. One of the other scenario questions that an interviewer may ask is, user has no internet access. So first we need to understand whether the user is connected using wired or wireless connection, and later we need to check the link light. We need to verify the IP address. We need to ping the gateway. We can also try pinging the Google DNS. We need to check the firewall policies, and later we need to check the ISP status. The next scenario is, user can ping IP but not website. The root cause will be DNS issue. The things that we are going to check is DNS server reachability. Use commands like nslookup. Check for the firewall logs and see if port 53 is blocked. Also verify the proxy configuration. One of the other scenarios where one VLAN cannot access another VLAN. The possible causes can be inter-VLAN routing not configured, firewall policy missing, ACL blocking traffic, or wrong subnet mask. The next scenario is VPN is connected but resources are not reachable. The possible checks that we're gonna do is phase 2 selectors, routing, firewall policies, NAT exemption, overlapping subnets. There may be another scenario like slow network performance. The possible checks that we're gonna do is interface utilization, duplex mismatch, broadcast storm, malware traffic, bandwidth usage. Let's move on to a few firewall based scenario questions. The issue is website is accessible internally but not externally. The steps that we can verify is we need to verify the DNAT, we need to verify the firewall policy, we need to check the public IP binding, we need to check if firewall is enabled on the server side. We'll have to also inspect the SSL inspection. The next scenario is internet works but some applications blocked. The possible reasons can be application control, web filtering, IPS blocking, SSL inspection issue. The next scenario is that the network has a few loops detected. So what will be the indicators if there is a network loop? There are chances of iCPU, network outage, MAC flapping. The solution is going to be need to enable STP, we need to check the redundant links. There might be a question like, how do you rectify routing loop issues? First thing we want to check is the default route, dynamic routing misconfiguration, or route redistribution. There might be scenarios like AWS EC2 is not reachable from internet. So the possible checks that we're going to do is security groups, routing tables, internet gateway, firewall on instance, public IP. Let's jump into FortiGate architecture. There may be a question like, what is FortiGate? FortiGate is a next generation firewall by Fortinet that provides firewalling, VPN, IPS, antivirus, web filtering, application control, all managed through FortiOS. What is FortiOS? FortiOS is the operating system that runs on FortiGate devices and controls. It controls policies, routing, security profiles, VPN. What is VDOM in FortiGate? VDOM or virtual domain allows multiple virtual firewalls on a single FortiGate device. It is used for multi-tenant environments and department segregation. Let's move on to questions from interfaces, zones, and policies. You might get a question like, what is the difference between interface and zone? Interface is physical or logical, whereas zone is a logical group. Interface is of a single interface. Zone can be tied to multiple interfaces. Interface is less scalable, whereas zone is more scalable. The next question, how does FortiGate process traffic? The answer will be very important. It's based on the routing decision, policy lookup, top to bottom, security profile inspection, NAT, and forward traffic. So mentioning flow impresses interviewers. The next question, why is my policy not working? So you need to check the policy order first and later correct source and destination. You need to verify the correct service. You need to be sure about the enable or disable of the NAT. You need to check the routing table. You need to check the implicit deny. Let's move on to the next section of NAT and routing. You might get questions like types of NAT in FortiGate. You have different types like central SNAT, policy based NAT, DNAT, or VIP. So what is a VIP or VIP or virtual IP? VIP or virtual IP maps a public IP to a private IP for inbound traffic. It is used for web servers, mail servers, etc. So the next question, how does FortiGate decide route? Route selection is based on longest prefix match, administrative distance, metric. So let's move on to the VPN questions. What are the IPsec VPN phases? There are two phases, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 is responsible for authentication and tunnel creation. Phase 2 is responsible for encryption and data transfer. You might get question like, What are the common FortiGate VPN issues? The answer is gonna be phase mismatch, proposal mismatch, NAT traversal disabled, incorrect selectors, missing firewall policies. You might get questions like how do you troubleshoot SSL VPN? You need to check user authentication, portal mapping, policies, routes, and logs. You might get questions on security profiles. What are security profiles? Security profiles inspect traffic for threats, antivirus, IPS, web filter, application control, SSL inspection. The next question can be like, why traffic is being blocked by IPS? The possible reasons could be strict IPS profile, signature updates, or sometimes it may even be a false positive. How do you debug FortiGate traffic? We need to enable the logs, use policy lookup, go with the flow debug, and do a packet capture. You can use commands like diag debug flow. Let's move on to IE availability and performance questions. You might get questions like what are FortiGate HA modes? The modes are active and active passive. Next question can be like what causes HA sync issues? It may be due to firmware mismatch, interface mismatch, license issues, HA heartbeat failure. The next question, how do you improve firewall performance? It can be done by disabling unnecessary inspection, optimize policies, use hardware acceleration, monitor CPU and memory. Now let's consider you're trying to enter a networking job as a fresher. Then you need to learn skills say like networking basics, OSI and TCP IP models, IP addressing and subnetting, switching and routing basics, basic Linux and Windows networking. The best certification to start with is CCNA Network Plus. The main tip I would wanna give is focus on concepts, not just certificates. You can use applications like Packet Tracer or GNS3 for practicing the labs. Let's consider you're trying for a L1 network engineer with an approximate of 1 to 3 years. The skills you would wanna have is LAN or WAN troubleshooting, VLAN, spanning tree protocol, static and dynamic routing, DHCP, DNS, basic firewall concepts. The tools would include ping or traceroute, Wireshark, monitoring tools. When it comes to certification, it's good to have CCNA, FortiGate NSE 1 to 3. So let's move on to the next level or L2 network engineer, approximately around 3 to 6 years. You should be knowing skills with the routing protocols, be it like OSPF, BGP basics, firewall policies, NAT, VPN, both IPsec and SSL, network security concepts, incident handling. When it comes to certifications, CCNP is the best fit. FortiGate NSE 4, Azure or AWS networking basics. Let's move on to the next level or L3 or senior engineer with an approximate of 6 to 10 years of experience. The skills one should have is advanced routing and security, firewall HA, network design and architecture, cloud networking, automation basics or Python. So the certifications would include CCNP or CCIE, which is an optional, NSE 5 to 7, AWS advanced networking. When it comes to abroad opportunities, countries like UAE, UK, Europe, Canada, Australia and few other countries have a huge demand. You need to focus on certifications, hands-on experience, documentation skills, communication. Experience is always greater than certificates abroad. If you consider specialization options, choose one path: network security engineer, or cloud network engineer, or NOC, or SRE, or network architect. Common mistakes: jumping certificates without basics, no practice labs, not updating skills, poor documentation. So one advice is gonna be build strong fundamentals, learn troubleshooting, keep upgrading skills, share knowledge in the form of YouTube or blogs. So let's do a small real mock interview for a network engineer role. It starts off with the basic screening. Interviewer might ask, "Tell me about yourself." I am a network engineer with hands-on experience in LAN, WAN, routing, switching, and firewalls. I have worked on troubleshooting network issues, configuring VLANs, VPNs, and firewall policies. I enjoy problem solving and continuously upgrading my skills, especially in network security and cloud networking. What is OSI model? Which layer does a firewall work on? The OSI model has 7 layers. Traditional firewalls work at layer 3 and 4, while next-gen firewalls operate up to layer 7. Interviewer might ask, what is the difference between a switch and router? A switch works at layer 2 and forwards traffic using MAC addresses, while a router works at layer 3 and routes traffic using IP addresses between different networks. Next question, what happens when you type a website in a browser? DNS resolution happens first, followed by TCP handshake, then HTTP or HTTPS request, server will respond, and finally page rendering. The next question, user cannot access internet. How will you troubleshoot? I will first check physical connectivity, verify IP configuration, ping the gateway, test external IP connectivity, check DNS resolution, and finally verify firewall policies and logs. The next question can be, what is NAT and why is it used? NAT translates private IP addresses into public IPs, allowing internal users to access the internet securely while conserving public IP addresses. Next question, what are the differences between IPS and IDS? IDS detects and alerts, whereas IPS detects and actively blocks malicious traffic. The next question, VPN is connected but resources are not accessible. Why? Possible reasons include missing firewall policy, incorrect phase2 selectors, routing issues, NAT misconfiguration, or overlapping subnets. Next question, what is the difference between IPsec and SSL VPN? IPsec is network-based and used for site-to-site connectivity, while SSL VPN is user-based and used for remote access. Next question, how do you troubleshoot a slow network? I check bandwidth utilization, interface errors, duplex mismatch, broadcast storms, malware traffic, and review monitoring tools and logs. Next question, what will you do if you don't know the solution? I will analyze the issue, check documentation, consult senior engineers if required, and ensure the problem is resolved while learning from it. Once after the technical rounds are done, there will be an HR round. HR might ask questions like, why should we hire you? You can answer, I have strong troubleshooting skills, a security-focused mindset, and the ability to adapt quickly. I believe I can add value to your team from day one. Next question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? The answer could be, I see myself as a senior network or security engineer, handling complex infrastructures and mentoring junior team members. If you want to crack mock interviews, use structured answers, mention troubleshooting steps, think aloud, stay calm and confident. Now that most of the companies have introduced cloud networking, you might get questions like, what is VPC, what is VNet, VPC in terms of AWS and VNet in terms of Azure, are isolated virtual networks in the cloud. They allow you to define IP address range, subnets, routing, security rules. Say it's like a virtual data center in the cloud. The next question can be, what is a subnet in cloud? A subnet is the logical division of a VPC or VNet used to separate workloads, control routing, apply security. The types are public subnet and private subnet. So the next question can be, what makes a subnet public? A subnet becomes public when it has a route to an internet gateway, the instance as a public IP. Next question, what is NAT gateway? NAT gateway allows private subnet instances to access the internet but blocks inbound traffic. It is used for updates, patches, security. Next question, what is Internet Gateway? An Internet Gateway allows communication between cloud resources and the internet. Without it, there is no internet access. You might get questions based on security group versus NACL. Security group is stateful, whereas NACL is stateless. Security group is instance level, whereas NACL is subnet level. Security group consists of only allow rules, whereas NACL consists of both allow and deny. Let's move on to cloud troubleshooting questions. You might get a question like, EC2 is not reachable from internet, why? So you can answer stating like, you will be checking the assigned public IP address, whether the internet gateway is attached, and you will check the routing tables, you will check the security groups, and later with the OS firewall. Now let's talk about a skill that separates average engineers from top engineers, that is network automation. So you might get questions from network automation like, what is network automation? Network automation is the use of scripts and tools to configure devices, monitor networks, reduce manual work, avoid human errors. Next question, why is Python important for network engineers? Python helps automate device configuration, backup, log analysis, API interaction. You don't need to be a developer, just basics are enough. Next question, what tools have you used in network automation? I would answer Python, Ansible, REST APIs, NetMiko, Paramiko, and you can add the skills that you have worked in your previous organizations. Next question, what is Ansible? Ansible is an agentless automation tool used to push configurations, maintain consistency, automate repetitive tasks. Where can automation help in real life? Firewall policy backup, VPN config validation, bulk switch configuration, health checks. Most of the times, even theoretical knowledge is acceptable in interviews. There might be questions on network design for an enterprise office. First, you need to understand the scenario, whether it's a branch office or an head office, or if it comprises of both. FortiGate firewall, VLAN based network, how the internet and VPN connectivity has to be, secure access. If I was assigned with the network design task, I would choose components like core switch, access switches, FortiGate firewall, ISP router, VLANs for HR, IT, finance, IP phones, CCTV, management, etc. When it comes to security design, I would consider inter-VLAN routing via firewall, IPsec VPN between branches, internet access with NAT, security profiles enabled. When it comes to I availability, I would consider having HA in firewall level. I would choose redundant ISP links. I will enable STP on all the switches. I will try to choose devices which comes up with dual power supplies, and also we need to consider the power source, or at least power that comes from different feed, so that even if one power source goes down, the other should take over. The next question can be, explain one project you worked on. I worked on designing and managing an enterprise office network. I implemented VLANs for department segregation. I configured firewall policies and NAT for internet access. I set up IPsec VPN for branch connectivity, enabled security profiles. I also ensured high availability using HF firewalls. I also handled troubleshooting and documentation. This answer alone can clear interviews. Let's think it from the interviewer's perspective. How does an interviewer evaluate a candidate? They look for clarity, logical flow, security awareness, troubleshooting mindset. Not tools, not brand names. If this video helped you, please do like, subscribe to the Network Fixer and turn on the notifications. Comment below if you have any doubts or questions on your mind. Until next time, fix the network, not the blame. This is Mithun from the Network Fixer signing off. Thank you for watching this video. Until next time, take care of yourself and have a great day. Bye bye.